All right, live stream is getting ready to go. And you should have just gotten a warning saying the meeting is being live streamed.
Yep.
Okay, now I'm going to record local too. Okay, welcome to Common Sense Bible Study, everyone. Appreciate you being here. And we're here to have a conversation with Joe Aymond. Joe is the pastor at Out of Ashes Ministry in DeRidder, Louisiana. His wife Heather is here with us also, not on camera, but she's here in the Zoom meeting, here in spirit and voice. Joe and Heather also have 4 children. Just a real brief introduction. Honestly, when I talk to people about this event, I kept getting you mixed up with Matt Napper, talking about, he was a National Guard recruiter, just retired.
Right.
But no, that's not Joe. Wait.
No, not it. Nope.
Yeah. So, from what I understand, you grew up in a Christian home. Started your own ministry in about 1996. Brady, I'm going to mute you. I think I'm getting an echo from your microphone. Okay, and I believe your father was a minister. Is that correct?
No, I have I don't have any ministry in my background actually.
Okay.
Not that I know of. But I was raised in church. Every Sunday, Wednesday. The preacher's wife was there to vacuum the carpets. We were sitting in the pew, or whatever,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So my mom was super faithful to bring me to church. My dad, I kind of joke about it. He was a good South Louisiana Catholic, which means that he went to church not for Christmas and Easter, but he went to church when there was a wedding or a funeral, pretty much, and usually only because there was a band and a party afterwards, because that's kind of Cajun culture. That's how we do things. And so my dad, just phenomenal guy, great guy, and a servant to everyone, but just never really got the God thing, the church thing until about 15, 20 years ago. But wasn't raised, he didn't raise me that way. I grew up with him kind of in the bar rooms. He was a musician and as well as owned his own insurance agency. And so Friday and Saturday nights, we were in the bar rooms playing from the time I was, oh man, I don't know, 8, 10 years old. And so I kind of got both ends of, growing up. I got the church stuff and I got the world stuff, also. So.
Yeah. Well, I was reading your bio earlier today, and you began your own ministry. You started a worship band. You're fairly young, and going around from youth camps, youth events for the most part, leading worship there. And that was about 1996, right?
Yeah. So I actually taught my first Bible study lesson. It was Sunday school in the little Baptist church I grew up in when I was 15. And, as a 15-year-old teaching your peers is kind of an odd thing, but,
Yeah.
And so I had kind of gotten tired of church. We moved a couple churches and just the ones that I've been in were, when you're a teenager, everybody else is wrong and you're right. And, I was tired of the dead religion and all this other stuff. So I just kind of got out of it. And then, like I said, I was raised kind of with my dad and in the band and the bars and all that kind of stuff. And that was fun, for a 13, 14, 15-year-old, being able to basically drink all you want and stay out all night and dance and party, that was like, why would you want to do anything but that? And so about 15, later in my 15th year, the church I actually grew up in, which is a small Southern Baptist church, was right across the street from our high school. And they got a new youth pastor, and he was a younger guy, had like a mega, like, business in the front, party in the back, kind of thing. Was the mullet king.
Hmm.
He had worked in sound. He was a musician as well, so we really hit it off. And I started with the youth group there, and it was the thing where, like, just the call of God just started to really draw me and really kind of blossom. And I was like, there's nothing else I want to do. And I knew that from that time. And so got some friends together, started a worship band. It was terrible at first, but we stuck it out and we worked on it, and ended up doing about 3 or 4 years until I graduated high school. And yeah, like you said, did D nows and True Love Waits retreats, and summer camps, all the way from Pensacola, Florida, all the way Holly Beach and Southwest Louisiana, all
Hmm.
over the place. So that was really a cool trip, a cool
Sounds
season.
like it.
Yeah, we got, most those couple of summers, 3 or 4 summers. I mean, we do like anywhere from 8 to 12 camps back to back, week after
Hmm.
week after week,
Wow.
and maybe like a retreat thrown in there in the middle and stuff. So it was just
And
it was one of those times that you just like, you go like, who does this? Who gets to do this
hmm
stuff? So
yeah,
yeah,
how
so
old
it was
were you
really
at the
cool.
time?
Um, Later 15, 16, 17,
Oh,
up to about 18 years old. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's just crazy. Just a crazy cool time. And I grew a lot and learned about discipleship, learned about leadership, the hard way. Made a lot of mistakes with friends and, and strangers,
hmm
doing ministry, whatever that looks like. And yeah, so then I that season kind of came to an end, because I went to graduated high school and went to university, went to college in Lafayette, and was working for First Baptist Church in Lafayette, which in the late 90s was like somewhere around like 5,000 people. I mean, it was,
hmm
back in the late 90s, that's a mega church.
Yeah.
And so I was working in the music department there, and just really was struggling, man, just struggling with my faith and struggling like I was being suffocated. This is, like Mercy Me and those kind of bands were just coming out. So worship, as we kind of take it for granted today, was just becoming a thing. I don't
hmm
know. I mean, I'm sure you got some folks on here that remember that season, where
Yeah.
we kind of went from liturgy and hymns to, guitars in church and stuff. And it was kind of groundbreaking, right? And
hmm
um, so I was drawn in worship, and so I did that for a few years, and I got to the point where I knew something was coming, and in the meantime, I had met an evangelist, some friends that were in our worship band. Their dad was a pastor of a full gospel church just down the road from the Baptist church that we grew up in, and so um, one year they said, listen, we're tired of doing all this dead Baptist stuff. You guys have to come to one of our full gospel services, which if anybody here is, grew up Southern Baptist, you stick to your people, and like, you don't venture very far out of that, especially into places where the gifts are moving and, that kind of stuff. So
hmm
we relented and said, okay, sure. And the evangelist man, he'd come every year, and he was a friend of the family and stuff, of the pastor's family. And I mean, he started, of course, the music was phenomenal and worship was great and everything. And then he got up to preach, and about 10 minutes into his sermon, I mean, he's pulling his tie off, he's sweating, beads of sweat. I mean, he's hollering and screaming in the mic and, just going after it. I'd never heard anything like this in my life. I was enthralled and I was scared to death at the same time. And
hmm
so get ready to the end of the service, and he does the altar call. And in the Baptist church, you come to the altar if you want to get saved, if you want to get baptized, or if you want to move your letter of membership right, from another Baptist church to this one. So, I mean, this whole little storefront church of probably 100 people, just the whole thing, all the chairs emptied, and everybody rushed to the altar. And I'm sitting there, and the sound guy is sitting there in the back corner, and I'm kind of looking at him, and he's kind of like, yeah, you're new here, so I'm scared to death because the preacher, the evangelist, was very much used in word of knowledge and the gifts and stuff. And
hmm
um
The
And
new
so,
territory.
yeah, I mean, absolutely new territory. And he's saying, "Thus says the Lord, I got," he's like speaking for God. And I was like, man, this place is going to fall down around me, and I'm going to be killed with all of these, all these blasphemers in here. I was scared to death. So, I waited it out because I had committed to stay. And man, not about 15, 20 minutes of that altar call, he makes a beeline straight for me, and I'm huddled up against the wall trying to hide. Nope, he finds me. And for about the next 2 hours, man, I mean, he just completely read my mail. I mean, it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. And so we started to develop a relationship. I started to get to know him, and I found out, that this cessationist way that I grew up was not where God was leading me. And so the pull that I was feeling, I didn't know it, but was for more of the spirit stuff.
Hmm.
And I didn't even know what that meant yet. So I got to know him. And over the next couple of years, when at age 20, I moved from my home to where I am now, to the DeRidder area. And traveled with him for 2 years. This is whenever the book God's Armor Bearer came out. I don't know if anybody remembers that book. I can't remember who wrote it now, but the whole armor bearer thing was really big in spirit-filled circles.
Hmm.
And so I lived in his house. I traveled with him. I cleaned his car. I washed his clothes. I mowed his grass. I was his armor bearer. And that's what I thought, needed to happen. And I watched him, Jay. My mom was a praying woman. She would get up at 5 every morning and pray. I'd walk through to get ready for school, and she was on her knees in the living room praying. But this guy, his name was Kelly. He would start praying after supper, um, and he would lay in the same spot and pray for 2 days straight, and not get up, not eat, not nothing. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And so, I know the gifts, especially maybe in Torah, circles, still kind of we may kind of have a cessationist kind of view. We don't know what to do with them. Maybe now that we're in the
Hmm.
Torah walk, and I feel that, and I understand that. But I saw this guy just absolutely be as real as you possibly could. And so I know that, when he called somebody to pick up the phone, it was because God was speaking to him. I mean, I know that nobody will ever be able to tell me that that wasn't the case, So it was just a really interesting season. So I'm sorry, I don't want to ramble. If you have other
Oh,
questions,
that's okay.
interrupt me, please. But um, so he ended up. I traveled with him for 2 years. I did music for him, and so
Hmm.
we would set out on like a 6 week speaking thing, and sometimes it was staying in the Sunday school classroom, sleeping on the floor, that kind of thing. After
Hmm.
a 4 or 5 hour service, sometimes I play guitar for the altar calls, and sometimes those would be 2 or 3 hours long. I mean, my fingers would almost bleed, by the time we were done, just because people, God was ministering to people and stuff. And so, again, just another really incredible season for us and for me. And then he got ill, and so he moved back to Tennessee, where his family was, and I took a job at the church where we were based out of,
Hmm.
which was an interdenominational church, non-denominational. The pastors, it was a pastor and son, father and son pastoral team, and they both had long legacy in the United Pentecostal Church. And so even though the church was non-denominational, it still had that really that really UPC DNA in it and flair to it.
Hmm.
And man, I started a youth ministry position. And Jay, to be honest with you, I tell people all the time, I didn't even like kids, teenagers when I was one. But I just wanted to serve God. I didn't have any preferences, and this was the position that was open, so I took it. Met my wife the next couple of years and got married, and so we ended up serving there as youth pastors for 15 years,
Oh,
and got married in 2002. Had 4 kids or 3 kids there, and so it was that whole season was it was interesting to say the least, and we can get into more of that
hmm.
if you're interested. But about 2000. I'm going to say about 2005 or six. I don't remember exactly, but I was just burnt out. I was just burnt out on just everything. I had pretty much quit uh, doing anything as far as the youth group on Wednesday nights. We had I developed a worship team, of course, and we'd do two or three songs, and then I'd give a 15-minute devotion, and then I'd let the kids play pool, shoot pool and hang out. I was just done, just really disillusioned, really burnt out. Thank God my wife kept everything going, because we went through a really, really rough season, personally, in our marriage and our family, just all together, and just searching for what in the world was real.
Hmm.
Coming from a Baptist background where, in the Baptist circles that I was in, there was almost nothing spiritual about your spiritual life. That may be kind of radical, and I like to try to say I don't know if that's what I was actually taught or if that's just the way that I heard it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But there was not a lot that was spiritual about living a spiritual life. And then through the next series of years, it went completely the other way, where everything was spiritual. You know what I mean? And it got into charismaticism, and where there was like spirits attached to your money, and it was just the whole thing about hearing from God, and when you didn't move unless you heard from God, and it had to be the right time and the right word and the right place and the right season, and the wind had to be blowing the right direction, and everything had to be right for it to be God. And I just always struggled with a lot of that stuff, because I just, when nothing means anything, I don't do well in those kinds of environments. I don't need a lot of structure, but I do need some. And it just got to be where it was like, what are we doing? Like what? I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what we believe. I don't know what we do. So anyway, we I just really had given up. My wife jokes all the time, like I'm the youth pastor and I'm sitting in church playing on games on my phone, while the pastor's preaching, hellfire and brimstone, and the church is going nuts, and I just like couldn't be bothered. I just wasn't in it, at all. So, I pretty much gave up on God and just the whole thing. And one night I was watching YouTube videos, and I was going to start doing a garden. We have an 80-acre farm, and so I was like, well, I guess I'll pick up a hobby, since ministry's kind of dead and I'm kind of done with it all. And so I was watching YouTube videos on organic gardening and trying to fill my space and my time with something. And a Michael Rood video popped up, and you guys have seen Michael. He's in his biblical garb, and the whole thing, and it was about the biblical diet. And I think that video was like, I don't know, it was like 27 minutes long. And all the experiences church wise and stuff that I had never heard the word Torah. I just, it had
Hmm.
never, I don't know that I ever had. I don't know that any pastor, minister, whatever had ever said the word. They might not have even known it themselves, And so, um, that video, it it's the video that I say God used to flip my switch. It's the one He used to introduce me to this concept of the Torah. And for the next, like, I don't know, I don't think I slept for like 2 days, 3 days. I just consumed everything I could find, about Messianic and Torah, and whatever. I didn't do much Jewish stuff because, you know, almost the worst thing from my background, almost the worst thing you could do was be Jewish. And
Hmm.
so I stayed away from that, but just anything Torah related, every teacher that was up and coming at the time, in 2005, 6, 7, I consumed it all for days, and it relit my fire. It's what God used to save me all over again. I really believe so. Um, my intention, was to stay in that church and change it from the inside out. That's what I hope to do. And it got to where 7 years later, right at 15 years totally of being there, I finally got the left foot of fellowship. And so we left there and kind of was like, well, what are we going to do? You know, I got 3 kids, a mortgage. I've never done anything else. I mean, I worked at McDonald's for a few years. I worked at an insurance agency for a few years. I don't have any skills. I don't have a trade. You know, like ministry is all
Mhm.
I've ever done. I don't know what to do now. And so people started calling, and because I had been teaching a little bit of Torah stuff at the church, which is kind of really what prompted the ouster. And people loved it. They were all about it. They were dying for it. And it was really starting to get to be popular. And according to the pastor, I was stirring up dissension and division. And so people started calling and saying, where are you teaching? We got to have more of this stuff. What is, where are you at? And so we started doing home groups. And we got up to doing like 4 home groups a week, 4 nights a week. And then we started to meet every other week, every other Shabbat at little community center or wherever we could find to rent, where we set up sound and chairs and tables. And my wife brought food and we tore down and set up, every other Saturday. And they got to be every Saturday. And then we rented a small storefront building for a couple of years that was being eaten down by termites, and that was, it was a good place for us for a few years. And then about 5 years ago, we found the place we're in now, which is 3 acres, beautiful pond,
Mhm.
beautiful building. You guys have visited,
Yeah.
and it just kind of fell in our laps. And I didn't want a building, I really didn't. And my wife, her wisdom prevailed as it usually does, and our board, our elders said, like, what are you waiting for, man? Let's pull the trigger. So we did, and that's kind of where we are today. So that's a shotgun blast of, of kind of how we ended up here. So
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, I, some of there are a few commonalities in our backgrounds, but, I grew up in the Assemblies of God, which
mm,
had some things in common with Baptists, but a whole lot not in common.
right.
Um, and, in church at least 3 times a week. And I remember, for my, my sister married one of the youth ministry team who was at that church, and they played what was essentially rock music in their youth groups. And I remember something you mentioned triggered this memory just totally out of the blue. You're talking about uh, this evangelist who visited, and he was starting to build up a sweat, because that's what the
Yeah.
evangelists do. And uh, I was probably maybe 6 years old, because I think my brother was about 11 or 12 at the time. And we're coming home from church, and do you know who Tommy Barnett is?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was
I've
our
heard that
pastor.
name forever. Okay. Yeah.
We went to his church when I was a
Okay.
kid, and we're in the station wagon, all 6 kids, and my brother just turns around and says, "I'm going to be a preacher." It's like, this is the rebel in the family. It's like,
Oh.
okay, why? What has happened? It says, because I want to sweat like Tommy Barnett. So he took the long way around. He went through gangland first, but now he's back to being in youth ministry in the Assemblies of God. So
Wow. Yeah.
that kind of worked out.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about when you saw that video of Michael Rood. If I were a mainstream going to church on Sunday Christian, and I saw a video of Michael Rood, I would block that channel, because I mean he's toned down a little bit, I think, since then. He doesn't wear the priest thing all the time anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes he wears a suit, which is kind of
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if I saw somebody, dressed up in this priestly robe with, the breastplate and, all this stuff, and the
Yeah.
things that Michael Rood says and does sometimes, I would have been turned off. And it sounds like you weren't really looking for that.
Yeah, I wasn't. And it's so funny you say that, because now I look back and I think, what in the world was that all about? It's almost embarrassing that I like, but I'll admit this. This is the more embarrassing part is that um, I, s- I was so my time at the church where we were um, when I lost the evangelist friend that I had, He died a couple years after I moved out, and when I lost, he was like a spiritual father. I don't know if we believe in that, but that's
Hmm.
what he was, and he just taught me so much. And when he died, I lost that, and so I was looking to the pastor that I went to work for. I thought, well, he'll fill that role.
Hmm.
Um, but the pastor, his dad was great. He was the community pastor. He was wonderful. I mean, he was just he was just like he was a walking hug. I mean, he was just fantastic. A pastor's pastor. The son was a capital N narcissist. I don't mean like capital. I mean like huge N. And I didn't know what that was. I mean, I was like 22. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what a narcissist was. And I'm a pleaser by nature. So a pleaser and a narcissist together is
Yeah,
like
that's
super
toxic.
toxic. Yeah, it's exactly super toxic. So I thought, man, this guy's gonna and he's a great dresser, super. I mean, he can walk into a room of strangers, Jay, that are, he can walk into an atheist convention and in 10 minutes have everybody giving offering. I mean, he's just
Hmm.
Mr. Charisma, dresses to a hilt, knows what to say, knows people. I mean, just he's a rock star in that arena. And I was just enamored by him, and because all of those things are things that I don't naturally do well.
Hmm.
I'll get up and play, and I think I can play and sing fairly well, but then like I want to go hide in the corner. That's my area, and then I'm done, and I want to be left alone. But and I just so for so many years of my tenure there, I was looking for him to be that discipler, and it just never happened. In 15 years, I went to his house once, and that was for a staff Christmas party when everybody else went too. Like it was never, hey, let's go out to lunch. Hey, I'm going to the hospital. Why don't you run and make this care call with me? It was never any of that. And so I just really that was I am still let's see, we left there in 2015, so how many years is that if I can math live? That's like 8 years. I realize I'm still dealing with healing from some of that stuff, because
Hmm.
not because he necessarily did anything wrong, because I had expectations that that he anyway. So all that to say, and not to vomit on everybody, but all that to say, whenever I came into the Torah movement, I was not about to follow any man. That was I hated leaders. I hated teachers. I hated anybody with
Yeah,
authority.
that's a very
And
common story.
yeah, oh, of course it is. I was having a conversation with somebody this last week that was talking about, they get it was a Bible study leader. I don't remember who it was now, but they were talking about, they get calls every once in a while where they'll say, like, somebody will say, well, like, I'm looking for a fellowship with no leader, because we're not to be led by any man. And I'm just like,
Yeah, you don't need any
I
man to teach you.
yeah, but I know exactly what that is, right? We know
Hmm.
exactly what that is, that's speaking. And I used to be really aggravated with those people. But now I have so much compassion for them, because I know, like, man, you're hurting so bad. Anyway, so but I I didn't latch on to Rude, kind of getting back to Michael Rude, not to make this about him, but um I was so disillusioned with the church. I was so disillusioned. I think one of the reasons is because I was on the inside from such an early age. I saw the I saw the inside of ministry from the time I was like 16.
Hmm.
And so by the time I was, 25, 26, I was like, this is all just it's just empty. It's just nothing. It's all a game. It's a show. It's a business. And so I was I was I was looking for anything, because I believe, and I don't want to preach, so stop me if I get too excited, but I I really think there's kind of like three kinds of responses that people have, because I still think about people that I sat in church with, when I'm playing solitaire or Angry Birds on my phone while the service is happening, because I
Hmm.
couldn't stand it. I think about people that I was sitting next to that are good people, and they love God. I mean, they were, at the time that God revealed the Torah to me, I know a church full of people. I'm talking about 300-400 people that I know personally that were praying harder than I was. They were worshiping harder than I was. They were studying more than I was. They were they were serving, they were loving more than I was. They were doing all the things. And yet they're still sitting on a church pew, and God showed me the Torah. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
It doesn't compute to me. I still don't understand it 15 years later. But I was so disillusioned that I think when people start to have that cognitive dissonance, right? That rub where they
Mhm.
go like, something's just not right. I think there's a few different responses. I think one response is that they want to question, they want to know more. And you probably get people that contact you from time to time going like, hey, I'm kind of interested in the Sabbath thing. And you go like, yeah, sure, I'd love to talk to you about it. And then you never hear from them again. You know,
Yep.
so it's like, I think they have to turn some part of their heart and their brain off, because, and then they just sit there in church and they just kind of die
Mhm.
on the vine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just kind of there
I
because
think.
it's their legacy, or, you know, it's
Mhm.
their family's been there, or they're just, you know, it's comfortable, whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other kind of extreme to that is people just go, there's nothing to any of this, I'm out. And they leave church, and I'm not going to say they leave God. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I have what he used to be a really good friend, one of the most dynamic preachers I've ever heard in my life, and kind of a superstar in our little town, you know, of like 10,000
Mhm.
people. Everybody knew him. He was great. I mean, he preached a house of fire. He was brilliant, knew the word. I mean, just could put a sermon together like nobody's business. And all of a sudden, comes out one day and he goes, I'm atheist. I've been living this life for too long. I can't do it anymore. And the town, the whole religious community was just shocked. And so I went to him. You know, everybody else was talking about his behind his back, blah blah blah. And this is part of the time when I was really struggling. I went to him and I said, you know, tell me your story. Like, I want to know I don't know what happened. And so he was very candid, and it was so enlightening, and it was so real and so raw. And I thought, this is a reality for a lot of people that
Mhm.
want to ask tough questions like, why, when I pray, does it not work? Somebody explain that to me in a way that's satisfying, and sit with me and talk about it with me until I'm satisfied. And just nobody's willing to do that, to answer those hard questions. And so he just thought, well, like, there's nothing to it. So I think that's another way that people go, even though they never maybe go the atheist route. They're probably still good people. They probably still live for God mostly, but they're just kind of checked out. And then I think there's us who go, you know what, things are not right, but
Mhm.
there's an answer somewhere,
Yeah. I'm gonna find it.
and I'm gonna find it. Right, if it takes leaving the church, if it takes finding a weird group of, you know, home group, or a, you know, whatever, cutting my family,
Some people on
cutting
a
my
weird internet forum.
yeah, yeah, right, exactly, yeah, exactly. You know, so, you know, some eclectic group of, you know, Bible nerds, whatever it might be, some guy dressed in biblical garb, you know, talking about the biblical diet or whatever it is. There's truth somewhere. This has to be true, and I'm not willing to just let go of it. I'm gonna wrestle this thing out. And, you know, I used to think like we're the ones that are right, that group.
Mhm.
But but who's to say? Who's to say those people that are still sitting on a Sunday pew, loving and worshiping God and taking care of their families and giving to causes and stuff, they're right where God wants them to be? Maybe that's you know, I'm a firm believer. I think I heard Steve Berkson. I'm just going to throw a bunch of, you know, names out there. I think I heard Steve Berkson say one time, you know, that God's hand, God's finger is what stirs our heart to the Torah. No man can do that, and I really believe that. I think we can have conversations. We can educate people. We can, you know, have thought provoking conversations, and all those things. And I think those are seeds that are planted. But ultimately, no man. Listen, I didn't turn my back on my whole career, my lifestyle, my calling, so to speak, most of my family. I didn't uproot my whole reality just because somebody made the argument for Torah, and I thought, I'll give it a shot. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
that's not how it works. We don't do things like that. It really was the finger of God that, and you know, and he used some excuse me, with all due respect, some wacko dressed up in, priestly garments to do it. And so what I did was I followed, Rude, and there are some of his teachings that were like 10, 12, 14 hours. And Jay, I have notebooks still where I transcribed every video. I wrote it down.
Hmm.
The Jonah code is like 14 hours long. I have it in a 5 subject notebook where I transcribed the entire thing. Jim Staley's Identity Crisis, the old one. I
Hmm.
transcribed that. Some of Brad Scott's stuff. I mean, just volumes of stuff that I wrote down. And I wasn't attached to a person. I was just looking for it wherever I could find it. And then I hooked up with Matt Napper somehow. I don't even remember how. A couple of years in to my Torah journey, and he said, "Hey man, I want to introduce you to this guy named Joseph Good." And he started kind of giving me Joe's credentials and blah blah blah. And I was so broken, man, at that time. I was so insecure that I thought, man, if this guy is everything Matt says he is, there's no way he's ever going to want to talk to me. I mean, like, I'm nobody. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. I'm broken, and so I was just like, okay, yeah, it sounds cool. And
Hmm.
he's a temple guy, blah blah. I didn't know anything about any of this. And so I just thought, it's great, cool. And so 2 weeks go by, and my phone rings one day, and my wife is on here. She can testify to this. My phone rings one day, and I answer it, and I'm like, hello, and a voice on the other side goes, "Hey, Joe," and I said, "Yes," and he said, "This is Joseph Good," and like I covered the phone. I told my wife, I was like, "This is the guy," and so we started a relationship, and I think Joe and Debbie have really been another salvation for me, because I I had gotten so in the Torah stuff, I had gotten so belligerent, I had gotten so militant.
Hmm.
I was chewing out people, good people that love God. I was chewing them out for, eating a ham sandwich. Grandma, cast her into hell because she's just trying to fix you lunch, and she doesn't understand all this stuff. It just I had gotten really angry and really nasty.
Hmm.
And I thought, like, this is not the way this is supposed to be. And I tell everybody this: Joe and Debbie, as much as they know, which Joe is an encyclopedia of knowledge about not only the temple, but just about the things, all the things. He can talk about prophecy, he can talk about things, but he can also tell you how many cubic inches of water fit in a cistern in the Temple Mount. Like, who knows stuff like that?
Hmm.
Um, but more than what they know is who they are. uh, they they have been, for me and my family, they have been a salve that has healed a lot of the rough, rather the rough places and stuff. And so, um, those, we all have to traverse those things somehow, and find out where our lane is, where our thing is. Um, Joe is not everybody's cup of tea, or cup of Joe, as it were. But
Hmm.
but that's okay. What I'm learning and I'm trying to do better at, is just to stay in your lane, love what God is showing you, and what God is calling you to study and what He's calling you to pursue. Love that and do it with all your heart. Um, but you don't have to be belligerent about stuff. You don't have to be the only way about stuff. You don't have to be a militant about it. Let people do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of Jewish folks over the last several years that I've met. Again, like we were talking before, and um, we have a Reform synagogue that's about an hour and a half from us that I've visited, and the lady there's a lady who's the president of the synagogue. She says, we don't care what you believe, we care what you do, and if you do what God expects, then we're good. And I've had a couple of Jewish friends say too, like, I don't even really care what you do. You do whatever, go with God. And And at first that was really kind of offensive to me because I come from an evangelistic background, right? Where
Hmm.
like, no, you have to do like what I'm telling you to do. I'm trying to mold you and fit you into the way that I see the gospel. I'm trying to get you into my camp and build our numbers. And I've really struggled with those statements. But I've come to finally kind of really understand that and go, you know what? I want to be so busy and I want to be so dedicated and surrendered to what God has asked me, my portion of the kingdom that He's asked me to develop and to study, that, you know what, if there's somebody that He wants me to share this with, they'll come, we'll cross paths, it'll be great. And if not, cool. I really don't have the energy or the emotional space to care and police what everybody does.
Hmm.
Do you? And where our paths cross, fantastic, man. Praise God. And where they don't, cool. So that's really, I don't know how I got there from the Michael Rood thing, but that's kind of where that's kind of where we are, where I am in
Yeah.
in my attitudes, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think your early path is really common in the whole Torah movement.
I agree.
And, people get, they get hurt. They get to the point where, they're finding those questions. They're saying, this isn't adding up. Something's missing. And, that first category of people that you described who, maybe they start to ask the questions and then they just drop off. A
Mhm.
lot of those people will go to their pastor or to some respected leader and start asking them, say, well, this other person says this about the Sabbath. What? And they'll say, oh no, that's all just legalism. That's Judaizing.
Right.
And it's like, you got to stop listening to them, because that's what's making you question things, is listening to these people.
Right. Yep.
And if they get past that, then they can get really bitter about that they have been, not that their pastor was lying to them deliberately, but the pastor didn't understand. I
Absolutely.
mean, most of the time, I'm certain that's what's happening.
Absolutely.
Sometimes maybe they do, and they're just trying to protect their enclave. But
Right.
most of the time, they mean well. They're trying to protect their people. But when you've been taught a lie for so many years, and finally you realize that this is all wrong, and this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing, you people tend to overreact.
Yeah,
And
100%. Yep.
yeah, they can lash out at anyone who is trying to pull them back to what they've left, and that's not the right way to go. One of the things that, people who will argue against keeping Torah frequently go to Acts 15 in the Jerusalem Council,
Hmm.
but they miss one of the most important parts of that. Is in the Torah people miss one of the most important parts too, is that those four rules that James and Peter gave to the new believers, that's not the sum total of God's standard of behavior. This is
Of
just a
course.
starting point.
Of course.
And the really important thing that I think they're missing is what's missing from that list. Like, they didn't say don't steal. I mean,
Right.
does that mean
Right.
stealing is okay?
Right.
But
Right.
what that does mean is that people are going to have different opinions about exactly what stealing means. And
Sure.
that's okay. I mean, eventually they need to get that straightened out, but they don't need to have everything right today.
Right.
You can start with, what's your biggest issue right now? Maybe start with that and figure the rest out as you go. Trying to make
Yeah.
people perfect right now just is going to just create more bitterness.
Yeah, I agree. And Jay, I one of the things that hurts my heart really the most when I look at, and man, I don't know, this is so it's so hard to talk about, I think, because when I found the Torah, it seemed like it was a movement, man. I mean, we call it this movement.
Hmm.
And just I mean, I've been in about 15 years or so, I guess, however the math works, I don't know, but um it just has seemed to just it's almost like we aborted what God was trying to do. Now I know there's still good people that are seeking truth, and there's still new people coming into Torah all the time. Um, but one of the most grievous things that I've seen, I think, is people that come in, and I think it's like you just said, it's because of a lot of hurt and a lot of animosity and bitterness. They come in and like the first doctrine, really strong doctrine they run into, that becomes truth, right? And it's usually the furthest thing away from what they were hurt over. So you understand what I'm saying? Like it's so for a lot of people, it's the name, right? God has the name. And so like they cling, whatever pronunciation they find first, that's the one they cling to. And then the calendar, right? And it's those things that seems like that keep cropping up, that I've seen over the years. And what I've seen so much of is I've seen people cling to that stuff, which you usually find in the first like 3 to 6 months, maybe a year. And then they spend the next 5, 10, 15 years defending that. And they never grow. Their whole life becomes, they've set up a new mountain, and that's it. Now that's truth. And then the whole rest of their life is trying to defend why they pronounce the name and why your pronunciation is wrong, or why they keep this calendar and your calendar is wrong, or why they do this and you're wrong. It's just, and it's like, that's aborting the move of God in my mind. I mean, I know that's strong language, but you know, one of the foundational verses that are passages that I love is, you know, when Jacob wrestles with the angel of the Lord, and his name becomes the wrestler, you know, like the, and that, if that's not an identity statement, man, for us, I don't know what is. You know, not like I'm saying we're all Israel or whatever. I'm just saying I want to be a person who wrestles with, you know, with truth and with the scriptures and stuff. And if I'm done growing, then that means I'm dying. There's no static state, right? It's either dynamic towards growth or it's dynamic towards death. And so it's just it's so sad that people just, you know, I think there are things, of course, that you have to go like, this is truth, this is foundational, this is fundamental. Sure, I get that. And I say all the time, like I'm not one to question salvation necessarily, but I am one to kind of poke at it and scratch on it and flip it upside down and go like, how exactly does this work? You know what I mean? How have people thought about salvation? You know, Passover's around the corner. Like, how have people thought, or unless you've already celebrated, then whatever. But, you know, how have we thought about salvation? You know, like, I mean, I'm not questioning it. I just want to
what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. And what are the implications? Once I've kind of gotten my head around, you know, some of the parts of it, what are the implications then? And so that's where kind of our group, you know, OAM, this is not an advertisement, but just, we have people from time to time that come and they go, well, like, we're looking for a community where we can argue about the Torah because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool. So how long have you guys been doing Torah? And they're like 6 months. And I'm like, I don't want to be disrespectful. I really don't. But I'm like, you know, we don't do that here. And I know what they're thinking. They're too polite to say it because I used to think it. They're thinking where you're not really searching, you've given up searching for truth then. Yeah. If you don't want anybody, and it's like,
you just want to dictate truth to everybody else.
Yeah, right, exactly. You just want to, and anybody that is a part of our fellowship, you know, you and Paula visited, I may have said this, may not, like, I as the leader of this fellowship, I don't care what our people do, in that I'm not going to, like on Shabbat morning, I'm not going to go, okay, raise hands, who all lit candles last night? And if you didn't, why not? And, you know, like, I'm not doing that. And so I don't police halakha. I don't police how you walk out the Torah. That's for you to figure out. And when we're together, we're going to do things together. And that tends to be my preference. And you know what, if you can't get with it, then sorry. But like, I'm not going to be, you know, I'm not going to be that belligerent about it. But I want as a leader and I want as a fellowship for us to give people the space. You know what, you want to do flat earth or pear-shaped earth or whatever the shape of the month is, then cool. Like, explore that, do it, learn about it, whatever. But don't try to hammer us over the head with it. Because what a lot of people don't understand is people like you and people like me and some of the other folks that you have that are involved in Common Sense Bible Study, we've already been through all that, right? It's not like we don't want to hear what you have to say. It's that I've studied the donut-shaped Earth theory, or whatever, whatever it is. I've studied the Zadok or Enoch count. Or are those the same? I don't know. I can't keep up. I've studied the the Aviv count. I've studied all the calendars. I know, and it's been a few years, so I'm a little rusty, but I've been through all of
Hmm.
that, right? And so sometimes new people don't understand that, and I think it's what I don't want to do is kind of the Hippocratic oath. I don't want to be the guy that goes like, "Well, you're new, bless your heart," and pat them on the head, because then that's just going to add to the church hurt that they already have. Just somebody else that won't
Yeah.
hear me out. So I'll hear you out, and I want to listen to what you have to say, but I'm not going to be talked down to like I just started this journey 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I realize there's hurt, and I get it. There's pain and all that. But there's a hostility and a bitterness and stuff that I wish we could find a way to deal with a little bit better. As leaders, I wish we could find a way to soothe it better, or to help it. Because the last thing you want to hear whenever you're hurt is, "Oh, you're hurting." You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to hear that.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that one out. How to help people kind of navigate that in a really helpful way. And I don't know that I've found it, because a lot of the people that come to our fellowship, that are in that state, once we have an hour-long conversation, they don't come back. Um, and part of me is like, "Whew, we dodged a bullet," and part of me is like, "Man, this is probably really the place they need to be, because it's probably the only place they're going to find where they have some, or the only place locally where they have some room to grow and ask questions, and to be hurt, and for everybody to love on them."
Well, that's
So
one of the main reasons I created Common Sense Bible Study, is because I was moderating one of the bigger Hebrew roots groups on Facebook, and it's just chaos. People are mean to each other, just calling each other pagans and whatever,
yep,
because they count the new moon differently.
yep,
It's like, why you're not going to the temple no matter what else you're doing. So
right,
is it really that important?
right,
And so, I created this site to try to help people who are asking those questions and starting down that path, to try to keep them from falling into those ditches,
mm.
falling into that, the flat earth ghetto. And because, when you start getting locked into those ideas, whether it's true or false, that's not the point. The
Sure.
point is that when you get locked into those ideas, you start cutting yourself off from other believers.
And you can't see things any other way,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think an example I use all the time is that over the last several years, and I've heard kind of people kind of go, well, like, "Oh, well, it's because of Joe Good that you're like this," and maybe, I don't know. I'd like to think that I can think for myself enough that I can
Hmm.
call a spade, but um, my family, just personally, we have not drifted, but we have intentionally, just call it what it is, we have intentionally walked more and embraced more of the traditional Jewish values, understandings, and customs.
Hmm.
Um, but we have studied them, we have wrestled, we've done all the things that we felt like we needed to do. But I want to educate people on that side of things, because I'm I've moved in a place, in a season in my ministry. I don't want to say past, because that kind of sounds derogatory, but we're not doing what you're doing,
Hmm.
in the sense that um, we're just in a different space, in a different season in our walk, and we have people that are very new, and I don't want to convince them that Judaism is all right, because that's not true. But also, I don't want them to be out there in the wild wasteland of Facebook Torah scholarship, like, which is what you're referring to,
Hmm.
right? And just
Yeah.
go like, "Well, good luck." Like, there has to be somebody that stands in the breach, and so I appreciate what you said about that. The reason why I think, or one of the reasons why I think I love teaching, more of kind of the Jewish leaning ethics and thoughts and philosophy and stuff and halakha, is because it's just a part of our movement that we don't have. It's just not out there. I don't know many people that actually are reading the Mishnah are reading the Tosefta, are reading the Talmud, are reading Shulchan Aruch, are reading Sefer HaChinuch, are reading any of this stuff. I mean, it's all out there,
Hmm.
but we just stand over here and we go, the Jews believe, and the rabbis say, and I go like, where is that? Can you pull that up for me and let's read it together? Oh, and then they can't answer you, and I'm
Hmm.
like, well, let's read it and see what it says, and and let's it's just, and so it's just a hole in the movement that I think is there. And I talked about it this last Shabbat, and we probably lost some more viewers, which is what it is. But I really feel like I've come to a place in my understanding in my walk where I believe the Torah is for everybody. I believe that everybody can partake in it. Everybody should,
Hmm.
as a a believer in Yeshua, as a follower of Hashem, all those things. Um, but also, that we can't deny that Israel, it was given to Israel. And we talked this last Shabbat about, like, yeah, but there was a mixed multitude. Um, and yes, you can see yourself as like, well, see, the Torah was for not just the nation of Israel, but it was for a mixed multitude, meaning everybody, all nations. And that's one way to read that. But let's not discount the other reading of that, which is a Jewish reading, which says, yeah, and the mixed multitude, they were the reason for all of our problems, as Israelites. They were the reason for the golden calf. They were the reason for, all this other stuff. I'm not saying one or the other is completely 100% right or wrong. I'm saying
Hmm.
I've made this statement the last couple of weeks. I'm tired of ignorant religion. I'm tired. I'm tired of ignorant practitioners of the Torah. Um, if you want to be sola scriptura and read the Torah alone, that's fine. But you're going to come out with some difficulties in how to understand and
Yeah.
how to live out the Torah. Keep them to yourself. Don't put your complexes on all of us. And so I just I want there to be more education. I want there to be more like the stuff you're doing with chiasms is fantastic. I love that stuff. It's not like I'm a massive, I couldn't find a chiasm probably if it slapped me in the face, but I love hearing you talk about it because it's something that you get, and I need that. It adds so much to the way I read scripture. And so I think more education. Remember, we kind of started off on this. This is what we're all mad about when we left the church, right? That there
Hmm.
wasn't enough education. People were restricting information from us, and that's
Yeah.
what got a lot of us hurt in the first place. Well, then why do we do that now? We restrict people to my way of viewing the Torah, my way of seeing the Torah. And so it gets on people's nerves, but I tend to be very pro-Jewish, very pro-Israel on a lot of the stuff. Again, not because I believe everybody's got to do it like the Jewish people do it. It's helpful to know like they kind of have a leg up on us with this stuff, and
Hmm.
it's not just something they do. It's become who they are. It's their culture. And I'm a Cajun, and Kunas, if you want to be really really frank about it. But so like gumbo is a big deal for us. It's a cultural thing, and like I don't want anybody from New York posting a picture on Facebook about their gumbo and it looks like white gravy. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's like don't try to be us. And if you are going to try to be us, or if you want to enjoy our culture, learn to do it right. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
give the culture the respect it deserves to do it right. Now, what does being right mean? Well, you go to any Cajun person's house, they're going to cook gumbo a little bit differently. But it's our right to cook it differently because it's our dish. Does that make sense? It's our
Yep.
right to have our own variations because it's ours. And that is how I see the Jewish people in relationship to the Torah. They have different disputes and disagreements and how they do it, but it's their right because God gave it to them as custodians. And so my attitude and my approach is study for yourself, study the Torah, study all the things. Just don't leave out, don't neglect the Jewish voice in your study because I think it can add a lot to your study. And so
Hmm.
again, I don't want to be militant. I'm calling people out for being militant. I don't want to be militant about that. I just want to offer it as a suggestion that maybe we need to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I've got issues with a lot of the early church fathers. but they also had a lot of good things to say. And then
Absolutely.
if you look at the rabbis in the ancient sages, well, they've been studying this a whole lot longer than the early church fathers were. I mean,
Sure.
their entire culture was steeped in it. So even if they don't, even if all of them don't recognize who the Messiah is, that doesn't mean that they don't have insight on the Torah and a lot of wisdom to offer. You just have
Absolutely.
to understand the perspective they're coming from when you're reading it and not take it as gospel truth.
Right. And I think, Jay, what that I use the phrase a lot. I want to study a topic so much that I create a world I can walk around in. And what does that mean? Well, when we hear people in this movement, when we hear them going, well, I'm studying this topic, or I'm researching this. What does that usually mean? We throw
YouTube.
that word reach. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, right. YouTube. Or with all due respect, I'm a member of Common Sense Bible Study, and I listen to Jay Carper. Okay, cool. That's great.
To start.
Yeah, exactly, right. I go to OAM, or I listen to this guy from OAM on. Great, that's fantastic. But understand that you're getting a very limited view on the subject as a whole, right? My Hebrew teacher, Yoel Halevi, who is an Orthodox Jew, lives in Israel. He's also he's an academic guy. He's a scholar. It's what his training is in ancient languages and all this kind of stuff. And he says, like, I've been studying a word or a concept in the Torah. I've been studying it for a year. I've been researching it for a year. And I'm like, how does that work? What do you mean? He's like, well, I'm reading every book, everything that's been written, article, book, lecture, everything that's ever been done that I can find that touches that subject. I'm studying that stuff. Agree, disagree, whether you agree or disagree doesn't even factor in. I'm just building a world around this topic so that I can be comfortable walking around in it. And I don't remember who I heard say this, but I've kind of adopted it. The more I learn about a subject, generally, the quieter I am, the quieter I get. I don't know if you've experienced that or have had experienced that with other people, but
Yeah.
the more I learn about something, the quieter I get, because I realize, man, there's so much context to this issue that it can't be done in like a 30-second Facebook post. I mean, you're just doing people a disservice. It's called the Dunning-Kruger
Yep.
effect.
I was
Right?
thinking the exact same thing. You see that curve where people who are
Yeah.
just new in a topic, their confidence is way up here.
Yep. I call
And
that
then the more
Mount
you
Stupid.
learn, the
Yep.
confidence is coming down here. Eventually it comes back up again.
Yeah, but that whole curve is beautiful. I did a whole Shabbat teaching on that. I called it worshiping at Mount Stupid. Um, but so many people live there, and the real test of our knowledge and our understanding, and I think our desire to really please God and understand what He wants from us, that peak is called Mount Stupid, and then you go through this downturn, this trough. It's called the Valley of Despair. Kind of channeling Princess Bride, right? It's the
Mhm.
Valley of Despair, where you just feel like I don't
Yeah.
know anything about anything, and I'm never going to figure this
Yeah.
out.
There's
But
so much to know.
exactly. But if you just give it time and keep pushing, you're going to come back up, like you said, and you're going to know what you know, but you're also going to be humble in what you know, because you
Mhm.
realize, like, man, somebody that comes in that's just started researching this with a couple YouTube videos, with all due respect, they're not even in my league in this subject. And I don't say that to be haughty. I
Yeah.
mean, humbly, I've done the work, right? I've put in the time to really research. And so I think that's always a good thing to encourage people. If more information is always better. And I want to be able to trust people to make decisions. Even when there are decisions that I don't like or agree with. I want to be able to trust them, because if I can't, then I become the pastor that didn't answer my questions. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I'm not building my kingdom. I left that when I left the church. When I left typical Christian ministry, I left kingdom building, or my kingdom building.
Yeah.
And so I just think I appreciate you mentioned Matt Napper earlier. I so appreciate stuff that he and Ryan White and Dina Dye. I know you had last week or 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
Um, you know, they don't agree on everything, but man, they're doing the work. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
doing the work. Rico, Cortez, like him, love him, whatever. I know Rico is kind of polarizing, but I can tell you this: I've sat in Rico's library, in his studio, in his home, um, and the dude puts in the work. Like I said, like him or love him, doesn't matter. He puts in the work, and that's the kind
Mhm.
of people that I want to be around. That's the kind of people that I want to learn from. I think that's just good for our circles.
Yeah. We're a little over an hour in, and I want to make sure that we give everyone a chance to chime in here. So, I mean, it's a great conversation, and we could probably go for another hour, but um, so Kevin and Scott, welcome. I saw you came in a little bit later, and I'm glad you're here. Um, Anybody who's got some questions for Joe, especially about his journey from the the musician's son into the Torah teacher. Carlos, go ahead.
Well, you want me to ask a question specific about that? Because I had another question in
Well,
mind.
whatever you got, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So uh, Joe, thanks for joining us. Appreciate that. I'm part of Jay's Fellowship as well. And we're talking about this weekend how we're um, just still trying to figure things out as a fellowship and, how to organize things, lead things, and um, learning how to be malleable, but at the same time, thinking where the boundaries are at and all these things. And um, for the most part, I think our fellowship have the same understanding and belief and things like that. A few of us, differentiate here and there. And we've had conversations on like, what's the threshold? Like what, you know, how do you protect the flock to ensure that, someone doesn't come in and just, you know, taint everything that we have going on. So we're constantly having those conversations and going back and forth in a good way, in positive way on, where's that line at. And I think I won't say formalized it, but we've had the conversation where, it's okay if somebody comes here with a different mindset understanding. And let's say that one person disagrees with the 99% of us, as long as that person, and kind of you mentioned this, they're not trying to consistently like push their mindset on us, then that's fine. You're welcome here. But I think we're still thinking about the where's that threshold piece of it. So if you think about, and I understand your analogy about gumbo, right? So if somebody comes in there with like, let's say you have a gumbo competition, people have gumbo, and this guy comes in with clam chowder, for example, you're like, man, that's not even part of any of this, like you can't be part of it, man. This is not even gumbo, right? So, where's that at? And you can argue, well, if somebody comes to our fellowship, and obviously I don't think this is going to happen. I'm using this as an extreme to kind of draw the point. Somebody comes in there and said, listen, I hear you guys follow the Torah, but I follow the Torah too, but I don't believe in Messiah. Okay, I don't believe Messiah has come yet or whatever, but I want to partake on these things, right? Well, that's a tough one because hey man, part of or who we are, it's it's believing in Yeshua. So there is no Torah without Yeshua. So I don't know, man. Should we just allow you in and come in here and you can say, well, yeah, yeah, man, as long as you're not trying to argue those things with us, then that's fine. You can just stay here with the mindset of hopefully our love and grace and mercy, because we've also have had that from the Father to us, and yes, we have to give that to others as well. I can see us being sure, hey man, as long as you're respectful about it and maybe you're open about it, then okay. But do you feel like there's a cutoff somewhere or a point where it's like, that's it, man. I don't even there's no need for you to be here.
Yeah, man, what a tough question.
Yeah.
um, I here's where I'm going to say I almost wish. Well, I got Brady as a part of our fellowship. I wish I had some other people of our fellowship that could that could help answer this maybe with a little better. Sometimes as a leader, I'll just say that, I'll just admit, for me, I sometimes I don't see the forest for the trees. And so people will say, they will characterize our fellowship in different ways. And I'll go like, oh, I didn't realize we were that, cause I don't have like an ideal that I'm trying to create. I really don't, which is kind of counterintuitive. I don't know what kind of fellowship we're supposed to be. Because again, I'm not trying to, create a little kingdom. We really have from the beginning, we really have just said, this is a family. I even hate using the word fellowship, but this is a family. This is mishpachah. This is, we love each other. We live with each other. If you want to be a part of that, then there's going to be certain conditions, but we've never, this is just us personally. I'm not telling you guys how to do things, of course, but this is us personally. We've never put doctrinal conditions on someone's involvement in the fellowship. The conditions that we do put are more, I would say, quality of life conditions, where you're not going to be belligerent, and that's the avenue we've taken. We had a gentleman who grew up Jewish. He was not a good Jew. He would tell you he was not a good Jew. Spent a lot of time in the military, did some pretty atrocious things that scarred him, and he was very, very hurt. He was beat up inside and out. He was angry. He had tried Christian churches and just nearly burned the places down. I mean, he was a walking train wreck. And then he found us, and we loved him. And, he came and he would argue every Shabbat when we have Oneg and stuff. He would argue, well, you said this, but, Judaism teaches, we believe this, and blah, blah, blah. And he was very, but everybody just loved him and loved him and loved him and loved him. And, we paid for his rent a couple months, and we just, we did what we could. And a couple of times I had to say, hey, okay, that's enough. That's enough. We're not going there. And I just, I don't want to be that kind of leader. You know what I mean? Where like people walk in the door and go, okay, let's check off your beliefs and make sure that nothing's out of line. That like, we don't want to do that. But then there has, it has to be Jay or whoever he delegates this responsibility to if he doesn't want it. But somebody, as much as we none of us want to be the leaders that maybe we came from, somebody's got to be the one at some point to go, that's it, that's enough, whatever that is that you agree on. For us, it's not a doctrinal thing. You can believe what you want. You can even talk about what you want. When it starts to get nasty, that's where I'm going to draw the line. I'm going to step in and say, that's not welcome. Now, if you want to be here, you can do what you do, but you're not going to do it like that. For us, that is the character of our family, of our group, of our fellowship. Not so much doctrinally, but attitudinally. That's not a word, but I just made it up. So that's how we've approached it. And this guy, after about 2.5 years, he just disappeared. And people still see him from time to time. And he's like, I got too close. It was too much family. And he couldn't take it because of his own issues. I would rather be that. I would rather be, I'd rather be, what's the word I'm looking for? Accused of that. They love me too much. You know what I mean? They love me too hard than the other way. But what I've also found, Carlos, is that in order to be that way and be able to be that way, your core group, Jay, whoever you guys have as your elders and your core group, you may not all do the same things the same way. You may not do, but you guys have to develop a family relationship where you're solid. You have each other's backs. You know each other. You know the what's in the hows and the whys, and you spend time together outside of Shabbat, and you know each other's families. And it has to really be an investment in who you are. And then you're not really threatened by those kinds of things. And I want, even when people, decide not to come back for a second visit, they're going to leave here knowing that they were welcomed, they were accepted, they were loved, they were heard, even if we didn't agree. And if they choose not to come back, then that's because they couldn't handle it, right? They wanted us to be in a certain way that we were not willing to be. That's their issue, not ours. But they're not going to walk away saying we weren't loved, we weren't heard, we weren't accepted, blah, blah, blah. Now, I understand that the way I'm talking about this is probably a minority view. People want to draw hard lines and stuff. That's just not me. And so that's not our community, but that has to be something that you guys develop over time. And that, I don't think that's something that can necessarily be delineated like in an elders meeting. You know what I mean? I think it's something that has to grow as you grow together. If you want Wild Branch to be a thing that is here for your kids and hopefully their kids, then you have to invest that time. And so I hope, if it doesn't answer your question, at least maybe it gives you some helpful insight
No, it does.
into
Yeah.
how we've done things. Yeah.
No, it does. I appreciate your answer. I think, we're kind of in the same direction as what you mentioned a lot, is just, I think about, the Christian church, for example, and what it's allowed, into their, because of the openness of it.
Sure.
Right? Now, I understand this is different because, there's a group of people that, have the same mindset, and again, they're protecting the flock, even if there's not this doctrinal outline, like you mentioned, of all these things, right? Because it gets to the point where all of a sudden, in a Christian church, there's something similar to like tarot reading. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
Right. Not exactly the same, but it kind of
Yeah.
touches those things, So there's no, and I agree with you. There's not like this perfect answer or a setup or anything like that, because you do want to open the doors enough to where you welcome people in and love them and all this other stuff, because everybody deserves an opportunity to get to know Yeshua. But also, the elders have a responsibility, or the leaders have a responsibility to protect the flock at any cost.
Yeah.
At any
And
cost,
yeah. And I agree. And I'll say this. I think where I've really focused on, and I know Jay does this as well. I've really tried to focus on is, I don't want to have the monopoly. See, I think knowledge, I think knowledge helps to weed out a lot of the, or I think knowledge helps to medicate our what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm losing my words. Helps to
Inoculate, maybe?
inoculate. That's exactly it. Thank you. Knowledge helps to inoculate the body against some of that errant or wild stuff. And so it is my duty as the leader, to not have the corner on all the knowledge. If I don't want my flock to be led astray by somebody that comes in with something else, it's my responsibility to educate them and give them the sources so that I'm really big on building up your own identity, your own thing where you can stand alone if that ever happens to be the case. God forbid. And so giving knowledge and making knowledge accessible, not to say that we want to be puffed up in our knowledge, but you know what I mean? Making it where people can stand on their own. I know my people, and this is not a brag, I just think this is because of the community that we have. People that have been coming here for a year, they may not know all the Hebrew words, and they may not know all the parts of the temple that I teach. They may not know all the stuff, but they know some crazy doctrine when it walks in, because we've let them explore and given some parameters. And I think one area where this is different also is that one of the beautiful things about the Torah is that however you interpret the different commandments, the Torah is the guideline. And so we have almost a hard guideline for behavior and for activity, that it's easier to tell where those lines are than it was in some of our church backgrounds where, again, like I said earlier, nothing meant anything, right? Everything was the Spirit. Well, that could legitimately be God, or that could legitimately be, the pepperoni pizza you ate last night. Who knows? There's no test. There's no way to tell, unless you have discernment. Well, but then what does that mean, right? I mean, I trust my wife's discernment, but I've lived with her for 22 years. I know her. Some stranger that comes in and puts their hands on my kids and tells them they have a word from God, they're going to have some hands put on them. So you can't, the Torah is kind of that fleshing out point where you go like, no, this is how we do it. And if you can get with it, cool. If you can't, then maybe this fellowship's not for you, and go with God, and hopefully, he'll lead you somewhere. And I've told people before, hey, start your own. Start your own fellowship. If you don't think I know what I'm talking about and you don't like the atmosphere here, man, go with God. Do your thing.
Mhm.
It never happens because nobody wants to do the work. This is hard work. Jay can tell you this is yes. Who was that? Was that Paula? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Paula can tell you probably better than Jay can. This is hard work. Building a community is hard. And also, we don't have, Southern Baptists here, we don't have a statement of faith on the foyer wall when we walk in. If you've been Baptist, or maybe Jay Assembly of God, whatever, has the statement of faith. We don't have that kind of stuff. We don't have the structure. We don't have the backing, all the things. Do you realize what kind of work we're undertaking starting these independent groups? It's insane that somebody would try to do this. Funding, structure, belief structure, protection, all this stuff. Nobody in their right mind would do this kind of stuff. So it takes time. It takes a good group of people, and it takes time. And it just takes you guys living together, doing like what you did this weekend. I really wish I could give you a hard answer, man, but that's been our experience. And if Brady has any kind of insight he wants to give, because he's been with us for several years now, I don't know. That's kind of my bird's eye view.
No, perfect. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, we've developed kind of not a formal system, but some maybe a soft firewall where new people come in, they're welcome to come join us for Torah study, or we have an event once a month that we encourage people who are asking questions. This is the first place you should go. And one of the men in the fellowship has a more early morning Bible study on Shabbat just for men. So if there's a man who wants to be part of the community and he's got a questionable background, say, well, you go to this men's thing for a while, and we'll see what happens from there.
That's great.
We've got a men's get together once a month. It's like, this is the place to bring your friends that you want to introduce, and we'll get to know them. And so we've got these different places where new people can kind of insert themselves, and we get to know each other.
Yep.
And we had maybe a few months ago, we had a guy come to our men's night, and he just wanted to ask the most outlandish questions, like, do you stone people? And why not? Doesn't the Bible say you're supposed to do that?
Yeah.
So and then he came to the next Bible study, and same thing, asking different people, well, what do you think about gays? Like, so Carlos and I both had conversations with him on the side. It's like, okay, this is who we are, and you're welcome to come here and study with us and learn from us, but if your goal is to come here and try to push us in a particular direction, if it's not the direction we've already established, that's not welcome. You're gonna have to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And you, like I said earlier, you can be accused of, well, you're not really wanting to deal with the hard questions. You're not really welcome. You're going like, no, we just know who we are, and we're willing to grow inside of the direction. We want to grow as much as we can in the direction. We have issues every once in a while, not issues, but we have things that come up where we have someone who comes to our fellowship, maybe that they have a family member or a friend or something that does Torah in our local area, within 30 minutes or so. But that person, they want to come teach, or they want to come do a lesson, or they want to come do something like that, but they're not willing to come to a Shabbat, or they're not willing to come to, if it's a guy, to our men's group and get to know each other. And that's a no-no for us. They could be brilliant, and they could be one of the best Torah teachers you've ever heard. But if they're not willing to be a part of the community, which means, I say accountability. It's not like I can't remember the last time I actually got in somebody's business about something. There's just not need for it. But, accountability as far as you're going to care about being a part and being part of the lifeblood of the fellowship. If you're not willing to do that, you're not going to come teach. Sorry, that's just not
Mhm.
how we do things here. You know what I mean? And because like I told this one couple that came several months ago, and they were like, "Man, we just want a place to argue the Torah." And I was like, "Well, this place is not for you." And I said, "You know, when we sit down for oneg, our people don't want to talk about calendars. They don't want to talk about." And I actually mentioned, somebody reminded me of this last week. I said, "You know, some people are those crazy flat earthers," and they were like, "Oh, we are." And I was like, "Oh, I got it.
I've
Okay."
done that.
And so I said, well, nobody here wants to talk about the shape of the earth. They could care less. I said, but what they will do is they will ask you about your kids. They will ask you about your family. How has your week been? You know, what's your prayer life like? You know, they want to do life together. They don't want to argue scripture. There's a place for that, but they want to do life together. And that's what we've really tried
Mhm.
to, that's really the kind of the ethic and the moral of what we tried to do.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Scott, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Jay. Hi, Joe. Nice to meet you. Um, uh, you gave your testimony earlier about or you characterized a number of people that leave the church. I almost look at that situation, having experienced it myself, as you are seeking wisdom, and you sort of realize, if I'm seeking wisdom, I cannot look to an individual as the source of my wisdom. When we left, we started a fellowship when my wife and I and our kids left the church. We started a fellowship, and unfortunately, an unhealthy situation occurred, and that is, there was an older gentleman there. I'll characterize it as ultimately became a cult. When we left, we realized that, but everyone would always look to him for, what do we believe? And that's not a sign of maturity. It's not a sign of really appropriating wisdom in a healthy manner. So, you know, I certainly wanted to point that out. That's just my experience, because we're all seeking, whether we get it or not, we're seeking what we filter through our paradigm and establish for ourselves. Okay, this is real. This is not. This is what I believe or not believe. So when you go into a fellowship, you know, you still need to take that approach, in my opinion. And as part of that, I know we were fellowshipping with Jay and Paula. It was just my wife and I and Jay and Paula for a period of time. They'd already established what was going on in Brenham. But I always enjoyed reaching out outside of the quote unquote fellowship, so that I would get to know Jay, he would get to know me. And I think that it's a very important element to establish in any type of fellowship situation. It involves maturity on the part of all parties involved, I believe.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah, I agree. Wisdom, um, I don't. I'm going to probably be controversial here a little bit and say I don't know that I believe that the Torah is the end goal, is God's end goal. I think that wisdom is God's end goal. I think the Torah is there to help us cultivate wisdom, which is, I love what you said. I
Mhm.
believe that. I believe that it is God's desire that at some point we won't need the Torah.
Yep,
I think that's the
exactly.
prophecy, right? That's so, um, and so yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and this is exactly why, like, when people ask me, well, how should I do this or how should I do that? I'm going to be very quick to say this is my experience or this is my opinion. And this is why I've gotten some, some crazy looks, especially from Christian friends and fellow pastors and people that I work with and stuff, that I go, well, like, we're not evangelistic. And they go, what do you mean? Like, gasp, what do you mean? And I'm going, we're not evangelistic. And I understand, this may be different for you guys, and I'm not, casting a criteria or anything. I'm just saying this is us. This is me. I've never been like in Sunday school. Whenever you went, like you came in and the Sunday school teacher was like, "How many people did you tell about Jesus this week? You get a gold star or whatever." I was always like, "Nope, not this guy." But what I did do is I did listen to people's problems all week. I was that kind of guy. but I wasn't this is going to sound really cynical. I don't mean it to. I wasn't a salesman. I was never the evangelistic type. Now that's my personality, and like it, love it, whatever. The personality of the leader determines for a large degree the personality of the group. And our group is not evangelistic. And the main reason why is because if I go out and I convince somebody, a Christian, who's living their life and they're happy and they're doing their thing, or they're asking questions, but they're not ready to jump ship yet, if I convince them that the Torah is the way they should be living, then who do they look to for answers? Me. And God forbid I have to be the answer giver for anybody's relationship with God. That is the scariest job in the world, right? So answering questions, giving, using wisdom and all that's great. But man, when you become the person that's convinced somebody to follow the Torah, then you become the person that has to be the source for all of their knowledge. And I don't know enough to put in a thimble. I certainly don't want to be the source for everybody's knowledge. So I love what you said. I think that's absolutely right.
Thank you, Scott. Do you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Paula, go ahead.
I had to walk to a different room. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I didn't
ma'am.
want it to echo for you.
Yep.
How you doing, Joe?
Good.
I want to say hi to Heather too. So I really appreciate your gumbo analogy, because I understand it. Your analogy about family. I feel like as you were talking about a lot of this, that some of what probably informs, a lot of what you're doing there in your fellowship is probably the culture you grew up in, where everybody's, you have extended community, you have big families, all that kind of stuff. And I can appreciate that. It adds a lot of insight into some of the things that you've been sharing. And you've been sharing some really great things. I could probably, pick out about 10 different things already that I'm thinking, is this because he's just, a Cajun and I just get his language? I don't really know. But I really do appreciate it. But I think that like the cultural aspects you were talking about, and about the family and what you're building, these things seem really nuanced. As I think about these things, even when you're talking about you're not an evangelist because you're not really a salesman, those are all really, they make sense to me. But I think, when Carlos was asking his questions, it got me thinking, we always want to have, and this is where religion often gets us, to have these clear boundaries and like really have things defined. And I can see when you were talking about the Torah that you were mentioning that. But when we talk about family, it really comes back to identity. And that seems to be such a difficult thing for as we're talking to people, whether they've been in church or just, unchurched. I feel like people just don't understand what that is. And how do you really help people understand what that is anymore? What identity is, how powerful it is, how important it is, and what we're doing when we're coming together and deciding what our identity is. And obviously we don't decide that, God decides that. But I'm just curious, how as you've been walking through this and growing as a family, like you say, with your fellowship, how do you identify yourselves in that? And how do you share that with people? How do they share that with people?
Man, you guys are checking all the boxes tonight. Okay, next somebody has to ask about the temple, and then we'll just go all night. Okay, so, oh gosh, that's such a great question. And I'll tell you, this is another one I don't have an answer for, but I'm just going to talk, and then you can eat the fish and spit out the bones. Okay, so I'm doing a series right now on Shabbat I think I'm on like part 17 of it, something like that. I don't know. I've never done something this long. But I really feel like it is the culmination of my identity question for the last, well, since I came into Torah. Um, I have taught things over the last 15 years that were kind of poking at the identity question. I even started a series on identity, kind of following a mixture of Rabbi Berkson and Jim Staley's teachings on identity, where like the two house thing and all that kind of stuff. And I really kind of tried to identify with that. And then one day I woke up and I thought, I'm not Israel. Again, I'm sorry for being, off color, but I'm a Kunas from South Louisiana. I'm not Israel. And I found that in the scripture, there's a place for me. There's prophecies that the nations will come. And so I asked Hanok Young, you guys may know him, tour guide, and he comes and speaks. He's one of my best friends. And I asked him one year, I said, Hanok, because he did really a lot of the two house stuff for a long, long time, and he's kind of rethinking that now. And it's cool to see him evolve in his theories. And I'm going to get more specific, Paula, in just a second. But so much of my identity for so long was built on the fact that I am a long lost Israelite. I am part of the lost tribes, and I taught that, and I think it's important. Somebody else said it, maybe it was Scott said it a while ago. I think one of the most important things that I've learned and I've tried to teach through the last several years is teaching people how to learn about who you are yourself, and realizing huge clue, realizing that you have a lens. You have a prejudice every time you read and interpret scripture. It's built into who you are. No one reads scripture and just reads it for what it says.
Exactly.
Nobody does that. That's impossible. It's impossible to do. I don't care how much you want to, it just doesn't happen. So I think learning about, I've said two things that I think are really important. Both of them involve putting the Bible down for a while. And this is scary for people, but just hang with me. Number one, put the Bible down and learn about you. Take personality tests, spend some time journaling, I'm real big on self-analysis and inventory. I'm big on turning your phone on for 15 minutes and listen to how you talk and what you say, and how does that inform how you believe about yourself. Identity, Paula, it is the nut that I'm trying to crack right now. So I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think it is foundation. It's fundamental. We all have a lens. We all have a way of seeing things, and that lens, or those lenses, are determined by hurts, successes. I was a good musician as a kid. I was kind of a big fish in a small pond, and so that gave me a lens on how I see the world. I need to acknowledge that and understand. So put the Bible down, and you know what? Go sit down with a counselor for a couple of weeks and just figure out how you see the world. Learn yourself, so that when you go back to the Bible, maybe you can recognize some of those prejudices you have. Maybe you realize that you're studying a concept and things are clicking for you in a non-helpful way because you've got some baggage or some pain back there. I'm a huge advocate. I've dealt with mental health. This is a part of my testimony I didn't talk about. I've dealt with mental health, with depression, anxiety since I was, I don't know, I can't even remember how old. It has been crippling. I've walked through suicide attempts on several occasions. It's been awful. My wife she's the best person I know, because she's lived with my crazy self for these many years. And I was kept from mental health in the church because it was not biblical or whatever. And now I am a huge advocate of, you know what, go let a professional that has spent their life studying people and the mind and emotions, let them tell you who you are. Let them be a mirror for you. I've taught in this latest series that I'm doing. The first thing you need to do is you need to sit down with yourself, and you need to come to grips with who you are. What are my positives and what are my minuses? This could take 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, 6 months, a year, whatever it takes, it's worth it. Secondly, find somebody who knows you and loves you. It could be your spouse, could be a coworker, could be one of your kids, and sit down and ask them to tell you who you are, and take the good and the bad, all filtering it in, all taking it in, and let them tell you about your toxic reactions or traits. Let them tell you about who you are in a good way, because there's going to be a chance that the list that you made of your own self-reflection is going to tilt towards the negative, because we all see ourselves in more of a negative way than we do a positive way. So people go like, I'm too scared to let somebody else tell me who I am, but that person is probably going to tell you the positives about yourself that you don't have on your list, that you didn't see. And so I think, if we read the Bible without understanding how we read the Bible, then we just use God's word, which is a powerful weapon to reinforce maybe an identity that is not supposed to be there. Does that make sense so far? Is that landing for anybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So,
I
and
get
I
it.
think, I think that's incredibly powerful. Secondly, put the Bible down and learn some history, learn some context, learn world history, regional history, Middle Eastern history, whatever, again, to kind of create that world that you can walk around in. So I think identity, especially for those of us in this movement, I think identity is the most important thing that we have to do. When I realized that I didn't have to be one of the lost tribes, that I could just be an old Cajun from South Louisiana that grew up eating catfish and crawfish and every other kind of nasty roadkill thing that you put in a pot. And then I realized that through Yeshua's work, that he brought me in near to the covenant of Israel. I don't know that there's a more miraculous thing. You know what I mean? And it changed the way
Yeah,
that
I
I
do.
started to see things. Yeah. I mean, it changed the way that I started to see things and see my place in the whole grand scheme of things. So personally, identity is huge for me. And I'm still chipping away at it. I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm still walking through some of this stuff. But for anybody that's listening that's interested, the series is called What Do You Want? And it comes from a passage in the Gospels where Yeshua turns to his disciples and goes, "What are you guys looking for?" And he forces them to answer what they want. And I don't think we've been given the liberty to answer that question, because we've never been asked, because our desires, as we've been taught by the traditional church, or at least as I was taught, my desires are always evil, are always ungodly, are never to be trusted, period, full stop. And so I've never had to answer the question, well, hey, Joe, God created you in his image. He has a plan for you. What do you want? And just trusting that the things that I desire are God's desires within, after reflection and understanding. So, and then I think that naturally, everyone in our congregation, I'm forcing to do that to the best of my ability. And I'm not making them turn in homework or anything. I've thought about it. But I'm pushing them every week. How did you do this week on your analysis? How did you do about finding out about yourself? How did you do talking to your spouse? How did you do talking to your coworkers? How did you do talk, and that is part of the crux of this identity thing that we're trying to seek out. So that has kind of permeated our whole group, because I want everybody to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And what is happening is that as people are becoming more comfortable with their own individual identities, the group itself, oddly enough, is becoming more cohesive. As we figure out our differences and our uniquenesses, everything is becoming more cohesive, and we're learning to trust each other on a deeper level because we're not so insecure with who we are. So a lot of this sounds like psychobabble, and frankly, it is. But it's because that's been neglected in our spiritual lives and our heritage so much, and it needs to be a part of who we are. I believe that the sciences, just in general, but specifically psychology, psychiatry, counseling, this stuff, I think it's all things that God designed, but maybe he just used non-believing people to find it, because believing people were so caught in their paradoxes and their dogmas that they couldn't see what God was trying to show them in the natural world. And so I'm really big on that stuff. So again, I'm going to stop because I get really excited about this topic, because I think it's so needed. I don't know how many Christian people are dying on the vine and they're being told it's a matter of your faith. Your faith is not strong enough. You're blah blah blah. You're whatever. When it's really they're facing an identity crisis, and there is no bigger identity crisis than people who have come out of the church and have gone into the Torah, and they don't know they're behind. They don't know which way is up. They don't know they're behind from a hole in the ground. Excuse me again for being off color, but it's that important. They don't know which way is up, and what they don't need is they don't need a doctrine. They don't need a doctrine. They need an identity. And so people ask me all the time, like, what is our label? You know, when I'm at work and my coworkers ask us, well, like, are you Seventh-day Adventist? Are you Messianic? What is our label? We don't have one. I've tried for 15 years. I've tried my hardest. I've used Hebrew roots, and I really liked that for a long time. And then I Google searched. I put in Google Hebrew roots movement, and I read some of the stuff that came up, and I was like, I'm never calling myself that again, ever.
It can get pretty ugly.
Yeah, I don't want to tell people that's what I'm part of, and they go Google search it, and they think that's who I am. No way. Okay, so but I'm not. I can't really call myself Messianic because I'm not Jewish, and that Messianic implies that you're Jewish. So that's even though that spectrum is way diverse, so that doesn't really fit. Do I feel like I'm a Christian? And that's a sticky one that I don't think I want to get into right now, because I don't want to completely alienate everybody that's on the call. You guys have been so generous. But for reasons that I'll disclose if you ask privately, I don't really consider myself a Christian in the traditional sense. So that doesn't work. Am I Torah observant? Well, not completely. Am I Torah pursuant? Well, I like that, except that implies that I'm just kind of trying, but I don't believe that I'm really doing it. Well, no, I want to do it if I'm going to do it. So I've just come to where, like, I don't have a label. I don't have a label. That's just the way it is. If you want to know what we believe, we'll sit down and have a conversation. I can't give you who I am in 2 words in a label. Life is more complicated than that. And if people can't handle that, oh, well, too bad. Then you really don't want to know that much. So, okay, I'm going to quit because I'm getting excited.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. I think I'm echoing, and Jay's gonna have to turn his mic off. But all of that is really insightful, and I get it. And I think, we've had a lot of the same conversations about so many of us over years of time are like, what do you call yourself when somebody asks? And I think that, like what you just said, prompted me to think about some of the experiences of Yeshua and people who are following him in the Gospels. And I really wonder if this idea of not having something to call yourself when somebody asks you, like in marketing, that people talk about having like your elevator speech for people,
Yeah,
so you
right.
can help them understand what you do or who you are
Sure.
in your work. And that's useful to help people understand in a short period of time, but that doesn't mean these people know you, right? That doesn't mean people can know everything you're about. And what you just said about that, we've seen it happen so much, and we've even been experiencing it ourselves, and we have the same experience as you, which is I don't have anything to call myself. But all of a sudden, as you were saying it, it just felt like that's the invitation. The invitation for people is, you can get to know me. You can get to know who I am, and you can get to know my God.
Yeah.
And there are people who, when you can't give them an answer like that, to put yourself in a box for them, that they will then continue to pursue a relationship and want to get to know you. And maybe that's the kind of people God is really looking for. And maybe that's the kind of people that you're finding yourself in fellowship with, and why you're finding yourself becoming and being a family. So it is profound, what you're saying, and some of the things you were talking about the, wanting to give your congregation homework, but the ways that you're walking them through this series you're in, is challenging them to really do some work. And I think it's really important work, because you're right. When we come into I say this all the time to Jay, you know, we have so much baggage, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming into these fellowships with all this baggage. And I'm always saying, how do we help people through that? And what you're talking about, what you're doing is really helping people through that, but it's not by becoming their own personal counselor, which we know we can't do. We're incapable of doing
Right.
that for people. But having a way to help them explore their own identity and be able to drop some of their insecurities and be confident about knowing and understanding who they are, at least on a very fundamental level, can have a really profound impact on their relationships. And that's what you're doing for them. So that's great. I love what you shared. I think it's
Yeah.
profound.
And I'll just a couple things to follow up. I think that labels can be good. Labels can be good. Sometimes we need labels. There's a biblical scholar that I love. Y'all are gonna go look him up, and you're gonna go like, "What in the world is he talking about?" His name is Pete Enns, and he is incredibly controversial. He's a Christian scholar. He's very liberal in his understanding of Scripture, et cetera, et cetera. But he has a quote that I love, and I'm not going to get it right. I never do, but it's something like, when my faith is all over the place. In other words, if he's studying a topic, or if he's just not understanding something, or he's weak in his faith, when my faith is all over the place, my practice sustains me. And for him as a Christian, I think he's like Episcopalian or Lutheran or something like that. It's the ritual that keeps him, while he's researching and studying and thinking about the Bible and asking all these difficult questions and exploring this whole incredible world of the Bible. His practice keeps him, whatever he's committed to do. That's the Torah for us, right? So where I'm going in this series is, we are going to start looking at the commandments and the halakha that the Jewish people follow, not in an attempt to do it like the Jewish people do it, but if the Torah is supposed to mold us into the image bearers of God that we are supposed to be, then we better know what it's about. And so that's where this is going. But before we do that, we have to know us first. So that's that's the first thing. The other thing is, again, the lenses that we have, it's so incredibly important that I forget who said it. Know thyself. I mean, I know that wasn't a believer, maybe, that, whoever it was, the philosopher that said it or whatever. But again, we have this concept still, this old church concept, that some things are godly and some things are not. Well, I don't believe that. I think God is involved in every part of creation, in every part of knowledge, in every part. God is God really all in all? If he is, then there's God stuff all over, not just in the four walls of the church. And the only way that we can enjoy and learn and gain wisdom from all that God has created is if we are solid, is if we are unable to be shaken and to be moved. So like Psalm 1 and those kinds of things, that tree that's planted, right? So that's my goal. I have been so sick emotionally and mentally that my goal is to be healthy. And I think that's part of the image bearing vocation and what God is trying to build us as image bearers. You can't bear God's image if you're broke, you're broke, busted, and disgusted. And that looks different for everybody. And so in a couple of months, my sister is a therapist. She has her own practice. She has 5 or 6 therapists to work for her. She's going to come and do a weekend for us and just talk about mental health and stuff like that. I just think it's that important. And it's not separate from your faith. Sometimes the things that we say, oh, well, that's not spiritual, though, those are the most spiritual things, so anyway. Okay.
I love it. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
I really love that. I mean, my background is health and wellness and nutrition and all this stuff. And I've suffered with mental health issues at different times in my life. And so I get this, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm always talking about health, but in the context of what I do and what I believe and practice, that's a holistic thing. It's not
Sure.
just about like, do I eat all the right foods or, whatever. It's much more. And when we think about this in the context of the body of believers, then it's really even more profound, that we be healthy, and that we be whole. And I do believe that we heal. I say this all the time. How that happens, you might be describing some of that, but how that happens, I believe we heal in community. I believe
I
that
agree.
Very true.
that's where that stuff happens.
I agree.
But how that happens seems to be a mystery. And what you're describing is that you're kind of unpacking some things to maybe make it less of a mystery. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I
Thank
just
you,
think
Paula.
rip the Band-Aid off and be very intentional. That's kind of my two things. Kevin's been
Yeah.
patiently waiting.
Yeah,
as I
we're at
ramble
2
on.
hours, so Kevin, you're going to be the last one.
Oh, hey guys. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Awesome. All right. So it was interesting when you guys brought up the topic of what do I call myself? I just wanted to touch on that. And again, this is just from my own experience, but um, it is very difficult to say, yeah, I'm a Christian, because they have this premeditated idea in their mind what they think is a Christian. And that could be different depending on who you talk to. But I lived in a Mormon community pretty much in Idaho, Boise, Idaho. And this girl that I worked with, she comes into the break room and says, "What are you? Like, you're so different than everybody else." And I was like, I chuckled. I was like, no, nothing different. And she's like, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, I thought about it. Like, I literally thought about it in my mind. What do I say? And I said, "I'm a follower of Christ." And she was like blown away by it. Like, she was just like, "I never heard that before. What is that?" And so she was asking me questions like, what do you mean? So I find it in a way, like, I wasn't trying to be, I was just basically what I was trying to do was just trying to spark conversation. But after I said that, I wasn't really premeditating myself of, yeah, this is what I'm going to say, and I had this all planned out. But it was very interesting because that led to a conversation. And so I definitely understand that part of it. And I just wanted to share my story on that. But what I really wanted to kind of ask is, so when it comes to pastoral ministry, I, as a as a as a person that's not a pastor, I understand how hard the work is, because I don't even like I don't even know how some of these pastors do it. They lose sleep. That's not healthy. They do, like, they just do so much. I'm like, I don't want to be a pastor. But then I do want to be like, I do have a desire to speak truth. And so my question is, where do you stand, Joe, on the where do you stand on the gift and calling of the ministry by a pastor? Because it seems like many men are just desiring to create their own church because they believe a certain way. When I became a Christian, when I became a Christian, and I think we understand what that means, so that's why I want to say that.
Sure.
I I was living a pagan lifestyle. I have my own exodus, or whatever you want to say. I had that. I mean, it was night and day, and I I I just want to know what your thoughts are when it comes to people that, like, how do you distinguish the calling of being a pastor versus just trying to um, like, okay, I believe a certain way, and I'm just, I just want to create a community that believes the way that I want to do things or I want ran. Because I feel like as a pastor, that, like, I think I myself would battle with that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be very difficult for me to try to, making sure that I'm doing this because it's a calling and not because I just want to do it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I
Yeah.
basically want to know what your thoughts are on distinguishing between the calling of becoming a pastor versus maybe someone's selfish ambition to be a pastor. And there are many pastors out there that do it for that selfish ambition, and just wanted to know your take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And wow. That's a great question. Um, yeah. So thank you, Kevin. My own personal experiences, I still don't consider myself a pastor. Now, folks in my fellowship would vehemently disagree with that, because I've had some great pastors that I think just like a rock star pastors. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, they may not have been the greatest preachers, but they just had an incomprehensible love for people. They had a patience, they had a grace, they had a mercy for people, and I think and I kind of look at the fivefold ministry as more of a fourfold ministry. I put pastor teacher together generally, because I think if you separate pastor teacher, you can get really toxic on either side. You can get a person who just loves people and there's no teaching, which can be pretty detrimental, or you can get a teacher that doesn't have love for people, and that's not good either. So I think that blend is really, really important. Not to say that it's, I'm dogmatic about it, but that's just how I tend to think about it. So I think there are way too many people who are pastors who should have been politicians. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, they missed their calling. They grew up in church and they were flamboyant, or they were diplomatic, and they were a mover and shaker. They were quick. They were great with people. They maybe actually very much love people. But put them in a pulpit and they become a narcissistic control freak. Put them in a political office and they thrive. But they were taught that the way you serve God is that you go into the ministry, right? And I know pastors that have been captive. They've been captive to pastoring for the last 30 years of their lives. They're miserable. They want to quit every morning they wake up because they should have been a politician, or they should have been an entrepreneur, or they should have been something else. But in our world, that's what you did. If you wanted to live for God and surrender your life for God, you went into the ministry. Hyper toxic, in my opinion. And so again, I think it comes back to, as an individual. See, this is kind of like a catch-22, and I know we got to wrap up, but those egomaniacs that are leaders thrive and survive on people that are insecure, that can't
Right.
see what they're really about. And so the antidote to that is educating people and them becoming again, like we talked about with Paula's question, becoming like knowing what is what. And so that you can see that nonsense a mile away. That doesn't mean the person's not a good person and they don't love God, but they have issues they haven't addressed, which is filtering their calling, is getting muddying their calling. And so as an individual believer, we have a responsibility to not feed that stuff in people. And of course, I'm very self-deprecating. Anybody that knows me will tell you that. But I'll say this kind of jokingly: the way that I see pastorship and the way that I do it, obviously, is the most right and the most healthy. Right? No, but I think I can say this from my own experience. I have been beat down so much that I have the opposite issue of being egotistic and arrogant and proud and like cultish leaders, where like I don't want to make a decision. I don't want to be the final say, because I know my track record and I know I've screwed up a lot of stuff. And I know I've put myself and I've put people I love in a lot of bad situations because of my own issues, right? And so I tend to back away and go the other way, where I run away from God's calling, and tend to not step into the fullness of what He's asked me to do. So I think, really honestly, Kevin, it all comes back down to relationship. The people that you know as pastors, if you're going to be a part of what God's doing in their ministry, and if you're going to submit to them, or however you want to think about that, it's like, I'm going to go visit this fellowship. I like the fellowship. No, you better know that person that's leading. You better spend some time, count the cost, as Yeshua says, and know
Yeah.
who they are, and know you enough, because I don't know what you think about like soul ties and that kind of stuff, but I know I've experienced this too many times to count, that I know that two people with the same brokenness in a room of 1,000 people with a live band playing and noise and lights and everything, you give them an hour, they'll find each other. I don't know how it works. I don't understand it, but brokenness finds brokenness. And so again, I'll go back to kind of what I was talking about, identity. We need to focus on us. And what do I think about those pastors that are out there actively pastoring, that are running these little cults? Not my circus, not my monkeys. What my job is going to be to do is to, if I ever run into that situation, or someone who goes to one of those churches, is to try to build that person up. And if I think they're being abused, really try to encourage them, and spiritually or somehow try to encourage them, and really try to get them where they can break away from that. So again, this is another thing that I could probably talk about for a lot longer. But when Jay said, "Hey, we'll shut it off at when people don't have questions, or 9 o'clock, whichever comes first," I thought, there's no way we're going to go that long. This will be over in an hour, and so we're 8:15 already. So I don't know. That's just some of my just really quick thoughts. I hope that's helpful in some kind of way.
No, that was great. Yeah, that was great. I just know that there's a lot of, when we talk about different denominations, it's not a surprise that we are where we're at. And I think in the end, the Lord, there's so many people that are out there that we will not know, but the Lord does know who is His. And I think for me, though, as part of being hurt by the church, or if you want to call it church hurt or whatever, it's very, very difficult when you're supposed to feel safe in the church. Like, that's supposed to be a safe environment. And this is just what you see, right? You see people who are doing stuff to children that are claiming to be part of the church, and there's pastors that are the narcissist and ego. They have a big ego, and they want power and control. And so I think the sheep are just, there's a lot of people that get sucked into that. I'm not the person to get sucked into that. I would not want, like, I have a strong personality, but I would not like want to make a scene just for making a scene. I would like say, okay, maybe me and him could talk in private about something I disagree on, but my main goal is unity. I think the scriptures speak clearly enough about unity. There's it just speaks so much about how to, you can call it church discipline, you can call it whatever, but even in Matthew 18, verse 15, if your brother sins against you, you go tell him his fault between you and him alone. He listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not, then you take one or two others along with you.
Yep.
What's sad, and then it talks, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. And that's where, we were talking about history. You got to know what those words mean. I always like to have my history with me reading the scripture, so I understand what these things really mean. But you can get the drift of what he's saying. And I feel as though church discipline could be a curse, so to speak, or it could be beneficial. Because if you put church discipline in someone who is a narcissist, oh boy, we're going to have some problems. But if you put it in the hands of someone that's very loving and wants to protect the flock and wants to protect, his children, then that could be a really good thing, because those people that are coming in like wolves, they're out. hey, we don't have time for this. And that's where I see the problem is. So it's like, I call it like this. We're walking a tightrope and we can't go to one direction or the other because we'll fall off. We gotta, and it's, I don't want to make it sound like it's legalistic in a way, but it's like our eyes got to be focused on Christ. And as long as our eyes are focused on Christ, we'll be in good hands. But once we start looking into other things, it can cause a lot of issues. And I just dealing with the church hurt, dealing with, dealing with people that have they like, I've seen my brothers, I've seen people not go to church anymore because they've been hurt by the church, and there's divorce and all these things, and it's just not a safe place anymore. I feel really bad because a church should really be a safe place for the people of God. And it's the times that we're living in, it's lawlessness. It's that's why I do believe in the law of God. I I do believe that God has a way of doing things and he has an order, and we just want to walk our own way. So that's why I think where we're at. But it does upset me. It does. It's sad because it's so difficult to find a healthy church these days. And it's getting to the point where smaller communities are just looking better, because when you have a bigger community, it just gets all crazy. So I'm sorry for keeping you later, Jay, but it's sad because we don't get to, there's just so much abuse that happens in the church.
Yeah.
And it's like people are having a hard time to trust, but that's where we got to put our trust in our Father, and those people will get his vengeance. And that's my hope.
Yeah, it is hard to be a community with 5,000 people. It's a whole lot easier with a few hundred at most, really. And having a small group of people that you can really spend time with, like going on a weekend camping trip with all the men in the fellowship, that kind of thing, that builds some lasting relationships. You get to know each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's not a lot that can be hidden at that point. And again, I'm just, I felt for a long time like my way of seeing community and stuff was kind of like, man, you're just trying to shirk responsibility. But I've really grown out of that and really see it as a way to, for so long, the church, Christians, believers have been coddled and nursed and fed, and we weren't responsible to study for ourselves. Oh, maybe do a little quiet time for 15 minutes a day, which usually lasted about a week, and then you sloughed it off, and you relied on the preacher on Sunday to light your fire or whatever. We've had so many years of that junk that I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie WALL-E, the little animated movie WALL-E, but the people on the ship that are so obese they can't walk, that's all of us, because we've not been forced to struggle with what we believe. No, we struggle with life, and we try to coerce the scriptures to speak to our situations, which they probably don't. And we've not been taught to wrestle with ourselves. It goes back to that passage in Genesis about Jacob being called Israel, and wrestling with God and man means you wrestle with yourself as well. And I think that's ground zero. So again, dealing with the church hurt, that's a you issue. I don't mean to be rude, but I mean that's all of us issue. Something has to start with us. And so I am a big proponent of forcing the people in my congregation to grow up as nicely and diplomatically as I can, and that includes care, self-nurture, healing, all of that stuff. But grow up, because we got work to do and it's not being done. So,
Amen. That's great.
All right. We definitely need to wrap it up here. Joe, two things before we hang up. One, is there a website, something that you want to send people to?
Yeah, sure. So, admittedly, I'm not super great on keeping our website up, but we do have all of our teachings that are logged. They're there. There's audio version and a YouTube link. We also have a YouTube channel and we have a Facebook, all Out of Ashes Ministries. If you search that, it's the little white and blue tree thing. So you can check out
Okay.
any of those places. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put a link to the Out of Ashes Ministries.com or org. I don't remember which one.
Org. Yep.
I'll put that in the show description
Sure.
on
Cool.
YouTube.
And you can get everywhere else from there. Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing, final thought. What's one thing that you'd like everybody to understand?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Jay, for inviting me. I know we've been trying to get together on some stuff for a while. I meant to say this earlier, but I really appreciate having the opportunity to do this. And I think finally, again, I have no greater desire than that we collectively become the temple as we're called to do, that we collectively become the image bearers of God. That's my ultimate goal. When I lay my head down to rest at the end of this life, if I can say that I was helpful in building the living temple, building the image bearers of God, that's my goal. To do that, it starts with every individual healing. And I don't mean somebody lays hands on you and you're healed. I mean doing the hard work of truly healing so that we can heal others. Those divine sparks that Judaism talks about, lighting other people and bringing out the light that is in them. I think that's where it all is. So it's up to all of us to do that hard work on ourselves. This is my final thought. Put the Bible down and do some work on you.
All right. Thank you. That's good advice. Appreciate y'all being here and sticking with us for almost 2.5 hours. That's a new record for us, but it was fun. It's a good conversation. Just a reminder, in Common Sense Bible Study, commonsensebiblestudy.com. If you haven't been there, we're going through the book of Romans. We took the month of April off from our weekly Bible study, but we'll be picking that up on first Thursday in May. And I think we're still right at the beginning of chapter 9. And, after 9 months, we're just starting chapter 9. Seems to be the way that it goes. So we're learning a lot. I've discovered that the more I try to teach things, I'm learning that everything that I taught before was probably inadequate.
Then you're doing it right. You're doing it right then.
So
that's absolutely.
So we are definitely learning together, and I am being challenged every week.
That's fantastic.
So appreciate y'all being here. Hope you stick around and, watch for the next talk we have like this. And until then, be blessed.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jay.
Bye, everybody.